Hello YouTube! Today's video is all about failure and rejection. So if you're new here, I'm Dr. Lisa Chappell. I'm a Doctor of Nursing Practice, an associate professor, and studying to have my board certification as a health and wellness nurse coach. I make videos for nurses, students, and caregivers on becoming more empowered and resilient because I've had my own struggles with disempowerment and a lack of resilience. And speaking of that, it really leads into the topic of my video today, which is really all about failure and rejection. What do I mean by failure and rejection? Well, I just think it's my own perception of those times throughout my career where I feel like I was a failure or I really took rejection heavily. I really became interested and fascinated by this topic when I came across Toastmasters and saw that some members had created resumes of failures. And really, failures and rejection can say a lot about a person who is successful, I think, because it just really shows who they are realistically, that life doesn't just unfold perfectly, that in order to be a successful person, it means that you have had your fair share of failures. And so that's why I wanted to share my resume of failures, if you will, throughout my career in nursing and in academia. My failures, I think, go back to high school and even before that. And one of my major, what I perceive as a big failure in my life has been that I suck at standardized tests. And this became apparent very early on when we would take aptitude tests throughout school, and my mother would get a report that I really just wasn't up to snuff, that I wasn't testing at grade level, and these tests showed that I really didn't have the aptitude to be very successful. And this didn't make a lot of sense to me anyhow, because back in middle school, I had a friend who I really admired, and she was a straight A student. And I remember asking her, how do you do it? How do you get straight A's? And she gave me a secret that I have followed and have been successful to this day by following this very simple secret. So I'm going to share it with you too. And she told me, in order to get straight A's, all you have to do is study for all the tests and do all your homework. That blew my mind. I was like, that's it? That's all you have to do to get straight A's? So because that sounded so easy to me, I started doing that. And lo and behold, I started getting straight A's. And I had no problems with test taking. I did really well on those tests that I had studied for. But these other aptitude tests, you couldn't really study for. And I did terrible on them every single time. This really became apparent when I was taking the ACT and the SATs, entrance exams to get into college. And I performed very poorly. And the ACT, I even took an ACT review course. I took it twice. I didn't do very well. I mean, I did okay, I guess you could say, but it was not what was expected based on the grades I was receiving, because you take a straight A student who can't do very well on the ACT. Then I decided to take the SAT, and I did mildly better on the SAT, but basically, because of my poor test scores, I was not eligible to even really apply for the colleges that I wanted to get into, because I was thinking of Ivy League schools, kind of like, see, I'm actually wearing a hoodie from one of them. No, I did not go to Harvard, but later I had the opportunity to attend a workshop at the Center for Medical Simulation, which was taught by Harvard professors. And so I was like, I'm getting a Harvard hoodie. I basically went to Harvard, right? No. Okay, so anyhow, with these test scores, I couldn't get into the schools I had been considering, and kind of out of shame decided not to even try to apply, because I didn't come from a background of anything that I was going to be able to afford to go to one of the schools anyhow. So anyway, I decided to just go to a local university, so I did get in, and I'm really happy that I went there. Attended nursing school and everything, got through, and then this next big failure came when I was applying for my first job as a new grad nurse. Now, there had been a hospital that was sending a recruiter and wining and dining the nursing students. They were really in high demand at the time, and they said, come work for us. We'll treat you well. We'll get you through this new grad program, and just come and apply, and your chances of getting hired are really good. And so I went and I applied there, as a lot of my fellow peers did from my nursing program. And I was invited for an interview, and I did interview, and then I remember receiving the call that I didn't get the job. And I was kind of devastated at that time. I guess I just wasn't expecting it. Anyhow, I called the hiring manager and caught her in the middle of her lunch. Like, I remember on the phone I could hear that her mouth was full, and I caught her like mid-bite, and so she's choking down her sandwich. And I asked her, what could I have done better in this interview? And she couldn't really give me a straight answer. She said I was qualified, but didn't really feel that I meshed well. And so I had to move forward from that experience and keep applying for new grad jobs until finally I was able to get a job, and ended up staying there for 12 years. And my next failure came when then I decided to apply for graduate school, and I had to take the GRE. So another standardized test that I sucked on. I just could not perform well on the GRE or any of these aptitude tests. Like, I had no problems passing the NCLEX, 75 questions, no worries. I had no problems with really any tests that I've taken in school, but for some reason, these standardized aptitude tests, I just can't get them. And so anyway, I took the GRE, and my score was so low that I couldn't even apply to the grad school that I was looking at the time. And I took the GRE then again, and I remember there was an essay section, and then there was another section. And on the first time, I think I did really well on the essay section, but then was terrible on the other section. And the next time I took the test, I did really well on the other section and then not on the essay section. So I just couldn't put together a full good test. And I eventually just gave up, and I ended up going to a school that did not require GRE scores. And finally, once I had my master's degree, the doctoral programs assumed that you're going to make it through, and they no longer required any graduate record exams or anything else, any of those aptitude tests to accept you into the program. Because from what I understand, these tests are kind of a measure of your ability and your aptitude. So your ability to succeed. And obviously these programs, I'm a hard worker, but these tests just did not, for me, for whatever reason, couldn't measure. Like, I just couldn't get it for some reason. And so that's been sort of like a insecurity of mine in terms of those kinds of tests. I can do well on any other kind of test, but those ones just, I don't know what it is. Those ones just get me. Another rejection is when I graduated with my doctorate degree and I applied for a tenure track faculty position at a university. I was invited to the campus, I toured the campus, I had a practice teaching session with the search committee. The search committee loved me. They put my name forward to the dean. At the time it was an interim dean, so there was a lot of dean rotation at that time. But I had the interview with the dean, and then all of a sudden, didn't hear from them. It's like I got ghosted. And I'm calling, talking to the chair of the search committee. You guys seemed really interested in hiring me, and all of a sudden, it's like I'm ghosted. The chair of the search committee just said, I don't know. It's up to the dean. It was like 8 weeks. And then I get a call from the dean that said, you know what, you're a nice lady, but we just don't really see it with you. And we don't think that you could be very successful as an educator. Well, boom, that was painful to go through that rejection. And that really hit home hard. And it was weird because then that interim dean ended up retiring and moving on. And the next dean that they brought in, the search committee went back and said, hey, we really did want to hire Dr. Chappell. So, let's get her back. And I remember the dean called me then and offered me the position. And at that time I was like, why would I want this job? And pretty much hung up the phone. And then my husband was like, what are you doing? You really wanted that job, call them back. And so it was eating a piece of humble pie to be like, okay, yes, I really did want to do this, and let's just let bygones be bygones. And now I've been at this university for the last 6 years. I guess the purpose of me making this video is just to show you that no matter who you are, and any person that you look at who is successful is going to have their fair share of failures. And failure and rejection are not really failure and rejection. It's just information. And it might be diverting you onto a different path than what you thought you wanted at that time. But it's also an answer. And I feel like the failure rejection is better than hanging in the interim and not knowing. I kind of wish I just would have moved on mentally from that position instead of hanging around. And I could have just gone back in and been applying for more and more positions. It's also something, I guess, that failures and rejections will tend to reappear in various ways throughout our lives. And for me, those aptitude tests, hey, that could come up for me again. I don't know when, but it could come up for sure. And so I have to be aware of that. If I haven't learned all I need to know from that failure and that experience, it may come up for me again. And same with the interview thing, that I guess I just don't mesh well in interviews, or I convey that I don't mesh well. And so that's something that I need to work on and learn from. And we can take this information and apply it in different ways, but we don't have to let it knock us down permanently. It's just information moving forward. Comment below. I'd love to hear about what are some of the biggest rejections and failures that you've had in your career, and how have you learned from them, and how have you transformed from them? Love to hear about it. I hope that this video was helpful to you. Please give it a like if it was. Hit that subscribe button below. Click the bell for notifications. I do have new videos every week. Have an amazing day, week, month, and year, and I will see you in the next video.